Okay, and so we are officially recording. Susan Laporte is department chair and will be kicking things off. We also have Chad Reichert and Matthew Ropp in the room, and I hope I pronounced both of your names correctly. So
Yes.
to disappear now, but please feel free to ask any questions in the chat that you would like answered. You can ask them publicly, privately to me, if you have any admissions questions, and I will let Susan take it away.
Great. Hello. Welcome, everyone. So it looks like we have Denise, Ashley, Pam, Catherine, and Nikki. I think that's everyone. So welcome. It's great to have you in the space and with us tonight. I appreciate you taking time out of your busy life to spend more time in Zoom. So thank you for that. I would like to let you know that if you have any questions, as Laura said, for either myself or my colleagues, Matt and Chad, who I've known and worked with for a very long time, you need only to just raise your hand or reveal yourself if you feel comfortable or put it in the chat. So we do have a keynote that we put together. It's representational of our department. And so I think without, unless there are any questions at the onset, I think maybe I will get started and then we can certainly take questions as we go along or just have conversation about what you're interested in, whether or not that's something that our department does, whether or not that's something that you can do when you graduate. I think as you enter into this process of deciding what and where you go to school and what you study, I think it's really important to kind of think about, you know, as hard as it might be right now, but think about 4 years from now, what you think you want to be doing with your life. Like what kind of work do you want to be engaged in? And if you have an idea of what that looks like, then we can help decide whether or not our department can help you get there. So I know those are like really big things to be thinking about, but maybe they're really actually great distractions to be thinking about in light of everything that's going on right now with COVID and the world at large. So as Laura said, my name is Susan Laporte. I have been teaching at CCS for about 2 decades. I started as a young educator, very excited about teaching, and I really haven't lost my love of doing that. 5 years ago, I was moved into the area of becoming the chair of the department. Our longstanding chair, Doug Kaiser, stepped down to retire. And so I've only been a chair for a short time in this, in the larger trajectory of my career. Just to sort of, you know, Matt and Chad have these stories as well, but just as a little side note, when I was in high school, I sadly knew that I wanted to be a graphic designer. So I was, I guess you could say, a little bit nerdy, a little bit ahead of things. Like I kind of knew what I wanted to do. And, you know, I have 2 kids right now in high school and I don't think they know what they want to do. So I identify with both sides of that, but it was something that I always kind of got bit with the bug early, and I haven't lost my passion for it. I am particularly interested in type design and in image making, and I love solving challenges, problems, opportunities, seeing the opportunity within those things. So I am a maker that needs a prompt. I don't know if any of you in the room are similar, but I think those are important ways to talk about how our discipline kind of operates. We are creative within boundaries. And my presentation that we'll share, that Matt and Chad will also chime in, kind of demonstrates that we set parameters, and then within that, creativity happens within that. If someone just told me to make something, whatever I felt like making, I would be like, I need more. You need to give me more. So if you have that kind of way that you make, that sort of needs a little bit of coaxing, a little bit of prompts, by all means, then you are very likely in the right place. You may be a designer, and because I do think that's how designers think. I graduated from, I'm from Chicago, so is someone else in the room. He'll tell you that in a minute. And And I graduated from University of Illinois at Chicago with a BFA in graphic design. I was also a product of community college. So I don't know if we have any transfer students in the room, but I did spend 2 years at a community college. Again, knowing that I wanted to be a designer because I was a nerd. But, you know, also doing it in a way that was a little bit more cost effective for myself. And then after I graduated from undergraduate, I worked a little bit in Chicago, and then I moved myself out to California to get a master's in graphic design at California Institute of the Arts. Just to loop the other person in the room in. So after I graduated, I also worked professionally in a couple places and then landed my first teaching position at Eastern Michigan University, where I met someone else in the room. And that would be Matt. So I'm going to let my colleagues introduce themselves and maybe tell a little bit of their kind of story before we get started, because we do have a lot of time. And I think, you know, it is important that we get to know each other and that you get to know us. We have a very tight and very familiar kind of culture in our department. We like to collaborate. We like to hang out with each other. We like to joke around with each other, and we support each other. So I'm going to let Chad take it from here. How's that, Chad?
Well, thanks, Sue. My name is Chad Reichert, and I'll give you the short of it as well. Like Sue, there were certain little things that I saw in high school and early in life that led me to graphic design. One was photography. 2 was my love of handwriting. And 3 was my real love of planning and organizing things. I just was naturally like, I was able, to Sue's point, you give me a prompt or you give me a problem, and I was really good at solving that. So I took a couple lettering courses, maybe a graphic design course in photography in high school. And I applied for one school for graphic design. I got in, and then the rest is history. So I studied at Valparaiso University in Indiana. I attended graduate school several years later than Sue out in California. And then I finished my graduate degree at the Minneapolis College of Art and Design in Minneapolis. I lived and grew up about 25 miles from Miss Laporte. So we are kindred Southside spirits. I deflected to the north side for baseball. She stayed on the south side of baseball. So we got the Cubs and we got the Sox represented in one community. I too, I love design process and methods. I love type design. I love typography. And so I teach up and down the curriculum. I share I think I counted 21 courses that I've taught since I've been at CCS. The only thing I haven't really taught, and that I leave to my very, very esteemed colleague, Mr. Ropp. He teaches the interactive and focuses on that. I focus on the motion and then teach the VisComs, the type, design histories, the type designs and all that other stuff. So as she said, I think we have a very fun, very challenging curriculum, and it's very relevant and it's very contemporary. So on that note, and for the record, my friend Matt over here was also born on the south side, but he was on the south side of Detroit. So I think that's why all 3 of us kind of coalesce together well, because we have that, I don't know, that go get them gritty.
Yeah, we're cut from the same cloth.
Yeah, punch them in the face kind of mentality, and we're not afraid to work hard and have a little fun along the way. So on that note, I will pass it on to, I don't know which way it is, but Matt is this way for me.
Mm-hmm.
Really?
Yes.
Hello, everyone. I'm Matthew Ropp. I too, like my colleagues, have been teaching for a long time. This is my 20th year at CCS. For about half of that time, I had my own studio. We were a small studio. We were local, and I taught part-time. And then in 2013, I started teaching full-time. As was already stated, my focus is a little bit of motion design, and I focus on the interaction design classes, which you'll learn about in a few minutes from our presentation. We have some really great interaction classes and curriculum and facilities. And we teach a little bit of code, and we use code at varying levels. We teach screen-based design. We teach interaction and experiential design. Again, maybe I'm getting ahead of the presentation a bit, but that's my love. Like my colleagues, I love photography. If you check me out on Instagram, not to give a shameless self-promotion, I have an ongoing photo series of Detroit. I love Detroit. My colleagues love Detroit too. And I'm always photographing Detroit and the city. I love old movies. I love tech. I collect old tech. I have maybe 40 or 50 old computers, most of which work. Some of them burn up and just melt over time, stop working. And I have tons of gadgets too. Some of that is things that I've collected over time when I was younger. Some of it I collect for historic reasons and nostalgia. And then some of it's to kind of learn from. And we bring into our classes and we learn from it from an interface kind of point of view. And I'm a shoe guy too. I have lots of shoes. Too many shoes. Yeah, Sue as well. So yeah, that's some of my loves. I love our department. As we already stated, we've been a really great team for many, many years working together. We have a really great dynamic and we all feed off each other in a great way. And we have a good leader. So I think to that point, I'll turn it back to Susan. And if we're ready to go, maybe she'll go through a little presentation. Feel free to jump in and ask questions along the way. Don't be shy. Don't feel like we have to just do all the talking the whole way.
Right.
And I'll turn it back to Susan.
Amen to that. Absolutely. We're an informal group. So if you have questions, don't hesitate to stop us or just say, hey, that's something I'm interested in. Can we talk about that for a minute? Okay. All right. So I will start sharing my screen and I will go ahead and hit play.
And do follow us on Instagram. I'm
Yes.
sure Sue will give that plug, but just so we don't forget, we are really active on our Instagram. We're always posting our culture, our process, the things we're making, the things we're reading and watching and doing, and all the things we love. So check us out there. I think you get a pretty decent snapshot as to who we are.
Absolutely. And speaking of snapshots and Instagram, this is actually a really great, these are snippets of an Instagram Meet the Faculty that Matt developed for us this year to kick off the semester. And so there are headshots, there are selfies. We actually decided that we would do our own selfies because we're not really a selfie group, at least not all of us anyway. And then it was a little bit of an unpacking of things we're interested in. So you have myself there, Kristen Cook, who is our program manager, Matt and Chad, and then Lauren Williams, who is our visiting ACAD fellow for this year and last year. So the five of us are a team that make up the communication design department, and we're all really important pieces of a much bigger puzzle, along with our adjunct faculty who have been, are also long serving and an integral part of our community. Oops, let's see. There we go. I click on the screen. Okay, good. The communication design department is, just so that you know, an interdisciplinary department. And what we mean by that is we seamlessly blend graphic design, interaction design, and motion design into a single curricular experience. So we don't have tracks. You certainly can take classes in certain pathways to enhance what you're doing. But by and large, we really see all three disciplines as an integration of where communication design is now as a profession. So we are a professional degree. We really do spend time preparing you for professional practice because we think it's really important that after a 4-year experience, you have skills that will get you out into the world and help you contribute to the ongoing legacy of communication graphic design and its contemporary history. So some of the focus areas, of course, are user experience design, branding design, motion design, publication and editorial design, environmental and exhibition design, interaction design, graphic design, design strategy and planning, motion branding, and packaging. So that's a lot to unpack and just talk about. So I think as we start to look at student work, we'll start to help you see the work and see where what part of our greater discipline that it kind of fits into. But as you can see, the career opportunities are quite vast. Our facilities, we are housed in the Taubman Center for Design. We are on the 8th floor, and it is a shared space for teaching and learning, but it's also a space that engenders a sense of community. We have labs devoted to interaction, design, and a vast array of other print tools and technology. So this is actually an image shot from our exhibition, our end of the year exhibition 2 years ago. Last year, because of COVID, we weren't able to have such an exhibition, but I think this particular installation was some senior work that I think really does a great job of demonstrating how we think about communication design. It is print. It's print. These are printed maps that were designed. So it's data visualization. It's typography. These maps are printed on cloth and not paper, so that they hang like banners. And there's a series of maps that also sit on the table, along with a web portal that is an interaction and interface web communication. This project was all about understanding and mapping creative institutions that exist, that are small little startups that aren't really startups yet, but small little communities that exist in the city of Detroit. So lots of organization and organizational thinking there, very much a systems approach to design. This is our interaction lab. It is a space, Matt, I'll let you speak to this because this is sort of your world. I think it's a great image that sort of demonstrates the role of the ceiling and what students do in this space.
Yeah, this is a really amazing space. We worked hard to get this space over the years. We've had it about 5 years now. And this is a room that our students can build out interactive prototypes and experiences. And as you can kind of see in the photo here, they kind of decontented this room for us. It has this amazing grid in the ceiling. They took the ceiling out and they put this metal grid in. You can hang things from the grid. You can hang projectors from the grid. There's like 4 projectors there now. And the best part about the room is it allows our students to build out prototypes from very lo-fi things. We build things out with paper and cardboard to begin with and just kind of test it out and feel it out and iterate and improve upon it until we get to kind of finished designs, as you see here. And because we have this room, we can build out those experiences over days or even weeks. And the room just has tons of flexibility. We have Ethernet of course, have Wi-Fi, we have Ethernet, and it has controlled lighting too. So you can turn all the lights off, you can use the spotlights. One corner of the room can be bright, the rest of the room can be dimmed. So as students build out kind of multiple projects throughout the weeks, they can control those settings. So it just offers a ton of flexibility in terms of building out interfaces, interaction, whatever they may be, and experiences all together. Our students build interactive websites and screen-based design. Then we start thinking about interactive objects and physical computing. And then ultimately what you see here is we combine those ideas, those efforts, those concepts, and we build interactive experiences, which start to consider spaces and places and even building out things in this room. So it's just a really great space for that.
And so, you know, in thinking about that, we use these spaces to try things, to experiment with things. So this is a great example of students using that space, not in a finished way, like you just saw, but more in process, really trying to kind of map out a project and a way in which to work with typography and to integrate these tools to sort of change the way we think about language and messaging and the user and their experience with those decisions. So we also have, along with the interaction room, and we'll look at more interactive work in a minute, we also have a lot of great facilities that are connected to print and bookbinding, cutting, and things like that. So very traditional tools that you might expect in a communication graphic design department as well. These are some pictures that we took of how we were going to social distance ourselves. And we're doing a great job with that too, I must say, faculty and students alike. We also have a great photo studio. Chad, I'll let you talk a little bit about the photo studio and the equipment, because that's something that you were integral in developing. So go ahead. It's a great space.
So if you see on that far right upper corner where Sue's taking a picture, we took out a bunch of content out of one room and we repurposed it to be a dedicated photo studio. So we have 2 photo bays with 3 different backgrounds on each of the photo bays that you can take pictures. And the point of having such a dedicated photo studio was to allow CD students to be able to not only understand the equipment, but to fully utilize the capabilities of the camera and to teach them how to shoot. So beginning in your motion design your freshman year, you'll get an understanding of how to use it so you can photograph and document things properly for your projects. But then your sophomore year, as part of one of our first communication design, visual communication design courses, you'll actually get in and start to use that photo studio to document work specifically used for your projects in that class. So in addition to the space and in addition to the interaction room, we have a whole array of equipment that is available, whether it be tripods for iPhones, tripods for general, DSLRs, iPads, sound equipment, sound recording equipment, anything you could possibly want, in addition to what the school provides for free. You can check out and use all of this equipment. And we often say that's a candy land or a toy store, because you can go in and basically get any piece of equipment that you want and use whatever you want in order to execute your project. So what you're seeing here is, on the bottom right, a slider where you can get some nice stable shots. You got some students in the middle using and prototyping clay to make typography and then document it properly. And so it's a really nice, as Sue aptly put, our theme is make, think, and play. Your freshman and sophomore years, we really emphasize play and what play can do to actually make and enhance your projects. And so to that, it's a great advantage coming in, because you get to learn to make and play with many different tools and many different pieces of equipment.
Yeah, in that previous slide, students were making with projectors and projecting light and type on the wall. And then that's the previous slide there, students were making typography out of clay and they were doing a stop motion piece. So it's always about play and experimenting, and not just being bound by the Adobe software or the computer screen. That's just one tool of the many that we use.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. And then this is a great example of another tool that we just recently integrated into our fold, which is a risograph printer, which is like a kind of photocopy machine on steroids. It's both a kind of, it makes prints, not necessarily photocopies, but it looks and feels like a photocopy machine. We have about 8 different color drums, and the drums are ink-based. So you can do these sort of wonderfully layered images by using the different drums and the different colors to layer the ink. And it's a really great image making tool. And we're super excited that we finally got one, and then now no one can really touch it like it's supposed to be touched, but it will be touched again at some point in some time. So there's Chad is there giving a demo. So it's a great tool, and it's old, but it's kind of new again, which is again kind of how we like to think about tools. So we like to mash up tools. So as Matt said, we'll use a projector to kind of throw and refract light onto type and project type or project image or project video. And then we might photograph that. And then as Chad was talking about, then we'll also do some things with like, analog materials like clay or stones or water and really start to kind of integrate. So we're constantly merging old and new, analog and digital in kind of weird and unexpected ways. And we kind of like that. And I think our students do too. And then we also have a dedicated classroom space. And in that space, students can do exactly what these kids are doing, kind of make a mess. Of course, we ask everyone to clean up after themselves, but kind of get into it and use that space as a space where they can make with their hands, make in old traditional ways, but also kind of integrate new and innovative tools as well along the way.
Yeah, and I do think to just emphasize one of the points, if you guys do like to make, we are makers at heart. All of us are, whether it's, our own professional practices. It's that idea that, to Sue's point, we have all this equipment. We're able to make in any regard. We have students who are illustration majors. We have students who take minors in, illustration minors, entertainment, who wants to do modeling. We have, you go to laser cutter upstairs. You go downstairs and you take the clay, you go to the Rizzo machine, you go to the sound booth, you have all these different equipments, and then you go into interaction lab, and then you're just start coding and playing with Arduinos. So it's a really nice way of thinking about the fact is we're giving you pretty much any tool that you could possibly want or need, and we're giving you a problem to solve, and you come in and say, okay, I'm going to use the tools that I think are most appropriate for the solution. And so what you see coming out, and you won't see this year, maybe you will virtually, but our student exhibition opening, where the best work from across all 4 years are on display, you'll see that great dynamic range of solutions as it pertains to, the client, the project brief, and so on. So again, I can't stress enough, you can bring your own skills. I mean, we had a student who was a laser engraver for 5 years, and he was doing some of that stuff in his class. So it really depends on what you want to bring to the table and your aptitude for learning or wanting to learn new things that really make a difference when you enter and complete our program.
So, and so we are makers, but we also are thinkers. And so because we're communication designers, and because, as we all shared at the front, we're all people that kind of like to have a prompt, have a problem to solve, or a challenge to kind of, tinker away at. We always start our projects with research. And so we always start with either research through the project or research with it as an outward kind of greater understanding of informing ourselves on the content that we have at hand. So you'll see a lot of times if you come to campus and do a walkthrough, or if you come and visit a classroom virtually this year, you'll see that we've migrated a lot of this sort of mind mapping to Miro, which is an online tool. But typically we get students to kind of mind map and to document and to create a kind of vortex of, if this is your idea, how do you see that idea in different ways? So we're very much about having students document that these steps and stages early on. So we think, we research, and as we're doing these things, we're always trying to organize what we're gaining, right? And what we're gathering, because it's a ton of information. So, as you can see here, we've got students that are color coding their Post-it notes. That's a part of their research. And then further putting a sticky dot. So that idea that research is this big thing that you have to kind of also whittle down to a kind of into salient ideas that you kind of form into a concept. And then we start making what we think that idea should be. And that can be making and playing. It's kind of can be messing around with an idea in order to understand it more, and also to experience and to see if there's something new that happens, serendipitously, there's a new idea that emerges that you hadn't thought of, that you only really got to because you physically started taking it apart and making stuff with it. So we make, and then we critique. So it's really important that, I think our department integrates critique pretty early on in a project. It's not something you do at the end of a project. It's something you do along the way. I think that we're really good at critiquing and talking about work, because I think we always frame it not in a sort of negative, like, oh, this is bad, but in a how do we understand what you're trying to do, and how can we as a group of students and faculty hear you, see what you're doing, and give you some actionable feedback that helps you take that idea further. So we see critique as a very important thing. It's not a scary thing. It's a really important way that you learn, and how you learn from each other, because you get to see what someone else is doing and go, God, I would have never thought of that. And you see someone else doing something else and you're like, that's such a crazy idea. Like, so it's another way of kind of immersing yourself into the culture and learning from it. And then other kids look at your work and go, oh my God, that's amazing. Have you thought about doing this? So those are kind of ways that I think our department sort of talks about work. So it doesn't feel quite so threatening or scary.
Sue, can I jump in?
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. Do you want me to go back, or do you want to just jump in?
You can go back a slide, but we critique at every level. We critique often. So sometimes it's a full class critique. Sometimes we'll divide the class half and half. Sometimes we do small crits. Those are great, where it's just me and 2 or 3 other students. Another thing that's really great about our facilities is it's very open. Our classrooms are very open, and we have just tons and tons of pinnable space. So as you can see in this photo, our students are constantly putting their work up, and that work is evolving. So as Sue said, critique is important, but also just students see each other's work. They see that process. Freshmen and sophomores see more advanced projects, and juniors and seniors are seeing freshman work as well. They can be inspired that way as well. But this work is kind of always out there. And I think our students are really good at helping each other out. It's a really kind of positive culture. And we always tell our students, you're not designing in a bubble. Get your work out there, get it on the wall, and get as much feedback as you possibly can along the way.
And so from there, the play begins, right? So you have to kind of visualize an idea in order to then continue to, and then you have to get feedback. And then that should inform where you go next with it. And so once you start getting things visualized, you kind of broken the white screen or the white paper, you sort of like, you've kind of started on a path, and that journey can lead you to lots of different, unexpected places. And so that's when we sort of try to encourage experimentation and play. You've got an idea. Okay, now let's play with it. Let's try doing weird and different things. So these are some great examples of play. Play where we have a student that's integrating interface design with motion design, and motion design, all of these little squares are little snippets, like daily little, 30 days of making kind of play. The other project with the Play-Doh is an interactive Play-Doh project that Chad's student did, where she was researching Play-Doh and finding out more about it, and decided to kind of, put, makey-makeys connected to it, so that as you played with it and you completed the circuitry, there's this amazing interface. I have another shot of this somewhere else. Chad, you want to go on about this? But it was a really great project because it's playful at its core, but it also takes these two things that you would go, well, it's like electronic Play-Doh. It was crazy.
Yeah, great. I think it was, what you're not seeing here is there's underneath the Play-Doh cans, there's Play-Doh, and we turn the Play-Doh into actually like mice or input devices. So as they were actually like moving the putty around, the longer it waited, it started projecting more and more videos. But the longer you play with it, it prompted you and said, you've been playing with this Play-Doh for 15 seconds, and now 0.5% of poison has been entered your blood, because that's how they used to make Play-Doh. And then you touch 2 Play-Dohs and play with them, and then 2 motion videos would come up, and it would tell you the relationship between, say, toxicity and cognitive behavior. So there's positive and negative. So this thing basically controlled the screen ahead of you. So if you had 2 hands or 4 hands, or if you touched all 4, then you had 4 motion videos playing with 4 information bits. So it was a really beautiful way of saying, yes, Play-Doh is a relic of our childhood. It's a favorite memory, but with that also carries the burden of producing Play-Doh and what the composition of it is and what it means for children's learning. So really, really nice feedback loop. So you can see Matt doing a wonderful job of portraying a user, but playing with it. And he was playing with the Play-Doh, and then what you could see is the reaction on the screen using projectors and other things. So.
Okay, let me close.
And I
it.
should say, in this same exact course, there was someone who did a poster. So it
Yep.
really depends on your comfort level, but how far you're pushed. Some people want to do motion, other people want to do books. So I think that's an important part of our play is when you are in one of our core classes and we give you a project assignment, someone does an interactive piece, someone does a motion piece, someone builds something, someone makes a poster. It all really kind of customizes to your skill sets and where you see yourself leaving school.
And so I forgot that this was the next slide. But yeah, so this is a really great image of the project. And so, but to get to this project, a student has to prototype things. And so prototyping is a way of, making something in a kind of, kind of lo-fi way. So trying to prototype something in its early stages. And then also prototyping things in hi-fi ways, right? So you actually start to be able to touch things on a screen. So we try to kind of move students into a really lo-fi space so that they can kind of do testing and acting out so that we can kind of really start to see whether or not the idea is going to work and whether or not users are going to respond to the interface or the objects that students are thinking of designing to get the experiences that they're hoped for. And so here's where we start to test things out, right? So looking at them with people and documenting whether or not those ideas are translating and working. And especially when we start to the image on the right was really about gesture-based interaction. So that really is something that you have to really determine, like, is this an experience or an environment that's compelling? And does someone realize that as they move closer to this thing, it is changing? And so how do you get a user to recognize that and understand that and respond to it? And so then from there, we have to do more tinkering, right? Because then, you don't get anything right in the first pass. And our department, we're very open and comfortable and encourage people not to think you're going to get anything done in the first pass. We are very much iterative makers and iterative thinkers. And so it's every iteration starts to lead you down a new path and starts leading you into a further resolution of the idea. So here's some work. So, Chad said we make posters, and we do make posters. So, students early on in the type 1, this is a freshman piece, but also we make posters in the sophomore year, the junior year. We're not afraid of print. We don't think print is dead, but we just sort of like to enhance print whenever we can. So these are some projects. This is a project that Chad was alluding to earlier. Where students start to use the photo studio. So these objects are selected by students, and as they're selected by students, they're selected by virtue of what they look like, but also what they start to signify or what they come to represent. So it's a project in a class where we start to integrate in the sophomore year ideas of semiotics. Semiotics is a crazy word, but it really is just symbol studies. Like, it's the study of symbols, and that every artifact has a set of symbols or a set of meanings behind it. So these were nesting bowls. And so for this student, it started to connect to her gender and the gender that she identified with. And also with that, then, all the challenges of being a woman and what bowls and kitchen devices sort of come to represent, but then also how bowls can also, represent part of our anatomy, right? And, our wombs and all these. So it got her kind of down a path of, very feminist kind of thinking path. And so we're totally excited when students start to make those connections, because it starts to then become a way for a student to personally enter into the work, but also still work through the principles of design and through the principles of the project to work their way out of it.
And Sue, if I can just step in really quickly, even though this was, if you can just step back one real quick, even though that this was a poster, this poster was done through the motion prototypes that were done earlier, where you project typography through a lens. You're looking at scanning different materials. You're looking found image, you're looking at your own image. So even though it is a print, we are still using kind of high or lo-fi, hi-fi techniques to actually create some really interesting images and compositions and collages that come together to suggest or to tell a story.
Yeah, and I love this set too because it uses clip art, and clip art's usually such a like poo-pooed kind of thing, but I'm a queen of clip art. I think you can do great things with clip art. So especially when it's about hairdo stuff, which I have a whole book of that kind of clip art because I love it so much. But yeah, I mean, so it is this high-low, constantly this high-low. So here you have these exquisitely photographed bowls. You've got some found imagery that's like a kind of burlesque. You've got this type that's gone through a bunch of different remediated kind of iterations. And then you've got this crazy clip art. So all of it's open game in our department. And we pride ourselves on that. Chad, you want to talk about this? This is a big one.
Yeah, so our sophomore year, we also believe in, I think the word you could use is systems. It's the idea that things are interconnected to each other and they have relationship to each other. So this project is an 8-week project that all the students go through, survive, and then thrive in, where they produce a very large capacity book. These last couple of years have been on the UFO report by Condon from the University of Nebraska in 1965. It's a report that you can find, a government report. And what they do in a short period of time, they take raw, unformatted text and they produce a 200 to 300 page book using InDesign, which is Adobe software, but they learn the back end and they learn how to use the code in the back end of InDesign to actually program it so it designs the books for them. So in a very short period of time, they're taking text, they're taking image and plates, they're making their own charts, they're making their own diagrams and building these very extensive, very beautiful typographic gestures using understanding and utilizing the software to their benefit. And we often say too, like when you see book projects from other institutions or other schools, it's usually a 20-page book that they do in that same period of time. And we do a 200 to 300 page book in about 8 weeks, and every page is touched and everything is quite exquisite. This particular one had Andrew had a book that he produced that was all text, and instead of putting all the plates and the figures in the book, he cross-referenced them and referenced the second book that you see is plate 35 and plate 36 that he created to create the system that they talk to each other back and forth and cross-reference. And then also another poster that went with it that documented all the diagrams that were in the actual book that he recreated. So a really kind of a milestone for the students. But once they understand the power of A, thinking, 2, sketching, B, using high and low techniques, they become very quick makers and very quick producers in a very effective and persuasive manner.
We also encourage students later on in their junior year to start doing research around ideas of sustainability. Sustainability as it relates to livable places. So not necessarily sustainability in the cradle to cradle, but really what makes a city sustainable and what makes a society sustainable. And so in doing so, they look at water, they look at housing, they look at education, all of these very interconnected issues. And so this is an example of a junior level project where they take that research and then begin to build it out into a book that documents. So there's a fair amount of writing, a fair amount of, editing of the research to get it to this point. And then of course, an integration of images and map and data visualization as well. We also have students that begin to interpret projects. As we've said before, the Plato project, this is a really great example of a thesis project that integrated motion and a physical installation, but it was also a collaboration. So we are very collaborative in nature, and our students are collaborative as well. So these students decided to do a thesis project together, which is kind of unheard of. Usually it's like thesis project all about me, 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 me. But this was a project also, I think, had a really light spirit. They were both students that were kind of a little bit intimidated by graduating. And so they decided to do a 30 days of making around the concept of adulting. So it was essentially 30 days of making to help them become more professional and ready to graduate. And so it was very playful. It was really great. But it really does start to also document another, I think, inherent property of our students, which is that they're very collaborative. They're very, very supportive and playful, and like to sort of poke fun at the edges of what they're thinking and how they're feeling. So that was all about making their bed. That was the other thing too, is they decided that one of the earmarks of an adult is that you make your bed every day. So they physically made origami beds every day. So they made their bed and then they made origami beds. And the days that they decided not to make their bed, they just crumpled up the paper. And it was this great, like, you know, physical data visualization of how well they did with just making their bed. I think Martha Stewart would have been very impressed. This is another project around looking at social sustainability and community sustainability. So again, we try to get students to think about using, this is a great example of using the laser cutter to create stencils. So this is like a little kit. We're not afraid of students kind of starting to get into three-dimensional environments, three-dimensional spaces, to create packaging, to create, like, let an idea take all of its many forms. So again, you've got graphic design here, you've got, and then you've got this physical, and this is in a sense like a kind of experience project, but it's an analog experience project and very interactive. So we play with these ideas and these words, and we let students kind of let the project and their concept and the audience dictate the outcome. And then of course we do branding. So branding is a huge component of what we do as designers. And when we do branding, we do it in a very systemic, comprehensive way. So all of the systemic thinking that they're doing in their sophomore year, they start to kind of helps them apply it when they start to get into branding. When we do branding, we also encourage them to not only do physical, but also digital prototypes as well. And so here you can see another example of a branding piece where not only does it exist in print, it exists in sort of mobile, screen, environmental, experiential, walkable kiosks that you walk by that, you know, lights back and communicates back to you, as well as down in with clothes. So we have t-shirts, but we also had students that actually made dresses because they made fabric that connected to some of the brand essence. So this is a lot of interactive work. So Matt, I'm going to let you kind of talk a little bit about it.
Yeah,
Because
great.
the next bunch of slides are all interactive, and then after that, it's motion.
Great. Yeah. So we have many interaction classes. We have 3 core interaction classes. And our students begin learning basic interaction principles, and we start designing for screens first, which makes a lot of sense. So your interactions 1 and interactions 2 classes are designing for screens. Those are medium-sized screens like your laptop. Think websites and different screen-based interfaces. And of course, we design mobile, which is mobile websites and mobile applications. But along that journey, we're learning, you know, just good foundation principles of interaction design. And then in interactions 3 and experience designs 1 and 2 that kind of advance these ideas, we start to introduce physical computing, and that's designing for the physical world, as you can see here a little bit. And we start thinking about designing interactive objects. And then ultimately we start designing interactive spaces. And that's where it kind of brings all these ideas together. So sometimes those interactive spaces are visual, like you see here. And sometimes they're not. Sometimes it's based more on audio, things that you hear and you don't see. Sometimes it's visual, but it's not button pushing, it's gesture based. This particular piece was a really interesting piece. The student did research on the future of eyesight and how we'll augment our eyesight in the near future, which we're already doing now. Think about the little spectacles glasses from, I can't think of the name of the company right now, but Google Glass has augmented eyesight with the little computer that floats above your eye. So this student was looking into those trends, and he created this interactive piece. And I think Susan alluded to this earlier. This piece was a proximity-based piece. So as you walk closer to the wall, it activated more content. And the closer you got to the wall, the more content kind of turned on. And his point that he was making was, in the very near future, just like we have all these distractions on our screens today, all these little pop-up messages and all these things that happen on our phones, what if this is in your contact lenses, and as you just walk around the world, you get these constant notifications and distractions? And then he wisely played with the visual metaphor of an eye chart. So in the upper left corner, you see the eye chart there, and it actually spells out a little message. So it says, I wonder, I can't read it, it's a little too small, but it spells out a little message. But as you get closer to this activates and turns on all these different layers. And then he built a supporting website to kind of further the story along. So you can go to the next slide if you want.
So this project was about, I think it was a data scrape, right, Matt? And I think data scrape that was a day in the life of sexual assaults in the city of Detroit. So, you know, again, students will start to get into issues and topics that are important and relevant to themselves. So this was done by a couple of young women that were appalled by the data that they were learning. And so they wanted to kind of create an installation that would make you feel overwhelmed by that data as well.
Yeah, that was real-time data, and our students are grabbing data, that they're scraping websites, they're pulling from real databases, they're working with real content, and sometimes that content is real-time content that's changing, you know, as it goes, as this piece was doing.
This was an old project that was an interface that was all about creating random and experimental kind of Dadaist poetry. And for every word that was inputted, every character, it was assigned a sort of trait. So not only did you get random poetry, but you also got these random images that were then created as a result. So we sort of created the poem collectively. Everyone popped in their own sentence, then you had to go in and add to it. It was sort of like, it was very Dadaist. And then it also kind of read back the poem. So it was an integration of MIDI and, you know, images that were created as a result of the MIDI. It was a very, really great kind of senior level project.
And that student loved, he loved music and sound, and he brought that love to his projects. And in that case, the interactive piece. So those different characters, as Sue said, they're activating, each character meant something, and it activated this kind of dynamic color array that you could see on the screen, but it also generated its own unique sound. So each kind of Dadaist poem, it was a new take on the Dadaist ideas. Each poem was a unique experience based on the letters and ultimately the words that you typed into it.
Mm-hmm. Now, this is an interactive piece, again, that is completely analog. So like the data scrape of sexual assaults, this was actually using all of the shootings that happened in the US for a given year. And so each piece of paper represented, was color coded. So pink sheets represented mass shootings in open carry states, and gray sheets represented mass shootings in states that prohibited open carry. So by just looking at the sheer stack of paper, you can get the sense of just that policy or that idea comes like kind of bears on you. And that part of it was a interactive physical display. So there's this punch. And so every hole that was darkened, you were supposed to punch, and that represented a life loss. And a hole that was just an outline that you didn't punch represented a life injured. So, our students definitely are interested in these ideas that start to shape a larger kind of cultural conversation. This is the same student, Paulo, who did the Dadaist poetry and sound and visual piece. Matt, you know a little bit more about this one. This one's pretty interesting as well.
Yeah, this was more of an experimental piece. So a big part of interaction design is interface design. And an interface is how you interface, how you connect with oftentimes a machine, but it doesn't always have to be a machine. My interface for my computer right now is my keyboard or my mouse. That's the interface. But in this project, this was a shorter project, students were experimenting with building their own interfaces. And in this case, he had this great little retro TV, and he worked with an Arduino, which is like a little microprocessor computer thing, and that's hidden in the back. But just by not bending, but moving the antenna in the back, it would create new images and kind of new narratives on the screen. So you can kind of see his hand moving that antenna, and he hooked up a little rotating sensor button on the back that interacted with that and read that. So just by moving that antenna, you could get these different messages displayed on the screen.
You know about this one, Matt? This one's pretty awesome.
Yes, I do. This was another great piece. These students were trying to communicate. They actually made a working game, and it had little sensors, and they're hard to see, but that's by design. They kind of hid those sensors, and they have little sensors on the ping pong table, and those little sensors capture the ball going back and forth. And they were trying to communicate how much energy is used when you do something like a game. And I think their hypothesis was, could we recapture that energy? And how much energy could we recapture and reuse that in some way? And how that would translate to the devices that we use. So I think that you see projected on the table an iPad, an iPhone, and a computer. And the longer they played the game, the more it kind of kept the score of the game, but also suggested if we could reuse that energy, how could we reuse it, and how many devices that could power.
Yeah, that's what I thought too.
Okay.
It's an old one, but it's a good one.
Yeah, it's not my project, but it was a great project.
So, I mean, we won't get into too much of the weeds of all of these, but as you can see, we like to integrate different tools. So this is like a receipt reader, right? So it's a little receipt printer. And this student had it so that it was all connected, that, you answer a prompt, and in answering the prompt, the piece of paper spits out, and then you kind of post it to the wall. So it becomes this sort of exhibition or this kind of curated experience. So again, we're constantly encouraging students to think about how you integrate different kind of tools, unexpected tools with really sophisticated tools, right? All the time, just to kind of really get them thinking about different ways of communicating and using technology. This is a piece that's all about voice activation. So the idea that, Siri and all these things that will listen to your voice and then, change and do things, and the interface responds. This was a project that used voice activated response in order to change something in real time. So this was about some of the houses being demolished in the city of Detroit without residents in the neighborhood knowing about it. And in some cases without sometimes people whose houses they were knowing about it. So the idea of the voice activation in the microphone was sort of like replicating going to a town hall meeting and voicing your concern. And in doing so, you're sort of changing the trajectory of the outcome. This was another project that was proximity based, right, Matt? And a project that started to use gesture in order to change or sweep. So sort of like what we do on a screen with our finger. This was sort of using it to kind of change an image happening on a wall that was being projected. So it was actually gesture-based kind of activation and interaction.
Yeah, the challenge here, we ask students, how can we display our work in kind of new and better ways? How can we display our digital work? It's really easy to display print work throughout our space, and you can see it in this photo. Posters and printed things are easy to just pin up, but how do you show and showcase some of the screen-based work? So the students made this. This was a working model. They used a little thing called Elite Motion, and they embedded that in the ceiling, and the Elite Motion recognizes gesture, recognizes your 10 digits of your fingers. And they actually programmed this. And by just swiping your hand, you could swipe through big panels of content. And then by pushing your hands forward or back, you could bring that content forward and backwards to kind of delve deeper into it. It was a really great project. And these few students, I think it was 3 or 4 students that worked together. Each of them had their own skill sets, but several of them really loved code and really liked kind of working with code. So they built this working model. It was pretty incredible.
And then we get into some motion work. So this is some early motion work. This is like a freshman course that we offer. It's Motion 1. And this is some of the stuff that you were seeing with the kids with the camera and the Play-Doh that were making the type. This is the byproduct of some of that work. So Chad, you want to share a little bit about this motion work?
Yeah, so just an overview. We typically, just like the interaction, we also have the opportunity to offer 3 motion courses, and one is required your freshman year. We consider that part of your foundations, typography, Motion 1, Interaction 1, and then a basic VisCom, and that's an advantage because we think motion is an integral part of your development, especially your freshman year. So this particular class, you're learning typography, how to create lo-fi and hi-fi typographic gestures. So these are we're getting in our hands dirty and getting in the weeds and projecting and recording a lot of these actions. But your freshman year typically is learning how to integrate type onto screen and also how to utilize video. We are very typographic based, so we do it from a typographic lens. Your Motion 2, we take typography and then we introduce video and say, how did those combine to make messages? And that could be branding, it could be infographics or data visualization. And then we have a Motion 3 that offers typography through the lens of modeling. And we introduce Cinema 4D, which is a kind of an industry standard for how you model and how you light particular things. And so in the recent years, we have had our alum teaching. We have a principal from Lunar North motion design firm in Detroit, started by 2 CCS CD graduates. They've been teaching. We also have one of their employees who's a graduate of CCS CD. And then this semester, we have a woman from New York City who is a freelance graphic designer and motion designer. And she is doing a remote course, and she is teaching After Effects and typography and doing a little branding and doing a little data visualization. So we see that as a way to extend the skills. So as Sue said before, we're not afraid of branding. We love branding, but branding is not just a print focused thing. We see branding as a mark, as an identity, as a letterhead, but we also see branding as motion on a screen. We see interaction on a website. So by introducing the motion, the print, and the interaction, we're able to do a full systemic approach to what graphic design, communication design, branding, and really create a thorough system for students to explore and to develop in their 4 years at CCS.
So these are some stills from a freshman course that really looks at title sequences. So deconstructing title sequences, known title sequences to movies, and reinventing them in typographic ways, as well as incorporating image and video imagery. So these are some really great examples of work from both Matt and Chad's classes. And again, you can start to see the same tendency to want to get them to look at refracting and projecting and looking at type beyond just a sort of static thing, not a static, but a dynamic glides across the screen, really trying to make it more engaging and more experiential, and definitely connecting back out to the theme or the idea associated with the movie. So you can see, the role of image. This is more advanced, working around an idea of anxiety and creating motion around that idea. And then also, again, right back to the physical collage, right? So that idea that going back to something that feels and looks like print, but actually is dynamic media. So we really try to encourage students to kind of not lock themselves into a style or lock themselves into ways in which they work. These two projects were designed by the same designer, but you would never know it by the outcome. And we
So
like
that's-
that.
That's collage. That example of collage was in a motion piece.
Yep.
This was done in After Effects. I have a sophomore class that is going to start working with collage in a lot of different ways. They're going to work with collage with their hands, where we literally cut things out with X-Acto blades and scissors and move things around a light table. I'm working on some code right now. I'm going to share with my sophomores, and we're going to use code to create generative based collages, where they put any images they want in a folder, run the code, and it'll randomly create the collages for them. And then we'll also make collages with other tools like projectors, like you've seen in some of our presentations, where you'll project image and type onto walls, onto boxes, onto objects and surfaces, and photograph them. So collage can mean a lot of different things. And then of course we look at the masters too. We look at our history and we present that to our students. So we're learning from the past, but we're also using lots of different tools and rethinking what collage can mean.
So this is a piece that Matt can speak to, and I'll get you started, Matt, but we also work with augmented reality. So the idea of how you can use technology to, actuate an object, and through hovering over an object, it starts to open up a complete different experience on the screen. So the Internet of Things, all of these sort of experiences, we really try to encourage students to think about. So Matt, this was about sugar, right? This was a project about sugar.
Yeah, this is a project about sugar and sugar addiction. And Sue's right. Our students play with 360 video. They play with AR, augmented reality. They play with a little bit of VR, virtual reality. This was the augmented reality piece. And on the wall, the student had a little poster that said free candy. You can see the word candy there. And then he had an iPad. And then he had this little dish of candies. And when you took a candy out, each candy had its own little color coding system and its own little icon. And when you hovered the iPad or your phone over the little icon, it would augment it and would trigger other little videos. So at a first glance, it was free candy. It was this kind of harmless thing. But when you hovered over it, you got this kind of secondary message. And here you can see a detail about body issues, or just about general kind of consumption of sugar, especially in Western cultures. And he was making a commentary about that. So it was a really great piece at one level, and then it had this kind of secondary message to it as well.
So I'll just click through, as Matt said, we definitely, AR, VR, augmented, whatever the project requires, we encourage students to investigate and try it out. So we're very tool open and very interested in experimentation. But we also do a lot of work that, really is servicing a community and servicing, a broader context. So through our corporate sponsor projects, we also do a lot of community engagement work. So we have, these are all the companies we've worked with. Mercedes-Benz Financial Services is one of our favorite clients, because what they've done is they will sponsor our studio and connect us to a community-based nonprofit that needs design services. And so then our students work with those groups. So it really kind of, does this great corporate community kind of overlap. And the students really get so much out of it, because we work with clients, we work with real schedules, we work with real budgets. It's really quite amazing. So we've worked with Quicken Loans doing a project around housing security and tax information. Just so many great opportunities for our students to kind of get very professional experience. And it really helps them kind of, again, as they, in their 4-year experience, kind of begin to get an idea of what they think their studio practice is going to look like. Am I going to go into UI UX and work at one of the automobile companies? Or am I going to get into motion and start to look at motion branding? And et cetera. So these experiences are great classroom experiences that you're not going to get at other schools. It really is a huge differentiator for us, is the way in which we kind of engage in the community and do that through, in many cases, our corporate partners. And then alumni success stories, we have a ton of them. Chad mentioned Lunar North, they're on here as well. This is a super small list. We have hundreds and hundreds of students that are out working professionally and really have helped to create a great network of alumni that our students, once they're done with their 4-year experience, we connect them back out to. So as you can see here, I did select some unusual ones, so we have a designer who designs type and has his own foundry. Kelly Miller is a founder and co-creator of a business, a motion branding business in Brooklyn. But here are some interesting stories about how we have studio practices started by our alum, and then they hire our alum. So again, I think that really, a lot of schools talk about the importance of their alumni network. Our alumni network is amazing. And so that is something that you really become a part of that community through the 4-year experience here.
One thing we hear from professionals over and over again is how prepared our students are. They're blown away at not just their skills, but their organizational skills, not just their design skills, but their organizational skills, that when they go work right out of school, they hit the ground running. They don't need 6 months or a year to kind of get their feet wet. They can just hit the ground running and they're ready to do what they need to do. So we hear that time and time again. We do have a rigor to our program, but that really prepares people, our students.
So this is a map that just starts to plot some of the places that students are working either currently or have worked at some point in our time at CCS. So as you can see, we have students all over the place. Also in Denmark working at Lego. We have students in Scotland with their own private practice. So we really definitely prepare you for more than just the local market. So if you have a hankering to be on the West Coast when you're done with school, you'll be prepared for that. If you're interested in New York, many of our students are, you'll be prepared for that. So we definitely kind of prepare you for design in a broader contemporary context, not just a local market. Although you can see the local market is just chock filled with our students. And then we travel. Before COVID, we traveled all the time. Students would organize field trips and we would go, and many times when we would go, usually all the time, we would run into or strategically visit studios that alum were working at. So this is an example of local travel. So these are studios in Detroit. So we're definitely open to and interested in visiting studios that are here in and around the city. But we've been to Seattle and visited studios there, visited studios where alumni are working. We've also gone to New York, same thing, visited big studios as well as small studios, Chicago as well, and San Francisco as well. So looking at both the tech industry there, other small studios. So we try to do the gambit when we're traveling. And then we do have a European study abroad program called Reprogram. And so then students can also elect to travel to Europe and spend 3 weeks. In the past, they've spent it with Matt and Chad. Someday they'll share it with myself and Chad, or myself and Matt. But last year we had it all planned and we were ready to go, but it got canceled. So someday we will resurrect this. I'm not thinking it will be this year in the form, in the way that we've been doing it, just because I think travel in Europe is getting bad again. But we're thinking about maybe something remote this year. We'll see. But the idea of getting students out and exposing them to other studios, other studio practices, other designers, other students, other cultures is just so great for their development and their ability to kind of come back home then and see their own world through completely different eyes and really become transformed by that.
Yeah, and that study abroad has been going for over 20 years. Last year was the first year we had to cancel it in a very long time.
Yeah, it was started by our former chair, Doug Kaiser. So this is some information that I'm sure admissions will kind of go over with you some more, but it's got application deadlines and information about financial aid and scholarships. I will reiterate what I know admissions will say. 98% of our students get some form of scholarship. So don't let the money impact or freak you out too unduly. Apply, get yourself in there, get your work in there. Again, because the world is in such a weird state in terms of how you can kind of experience the campus, I invite all of you to think about and reach out to me either directly or through the admissions department. If you want to visit a classroom, that's so easy to do virtually. It really is easy to do, and you can get a sense of our community through those experiences. So they're not the same as being in a room and being in the building and feeling sort of the weird and wonderful energy. But I still think it's definitely gives you a window into what life is like in our department. So I invite each and every one of you to take me up on that offer and let us know if you'd like to visit a classroom either this semester or next semester is totally fine with all of us. And then here's our information. Yes, I misspelled Instagram, but I was doing it phonetically like the kids like to do nowadays, just get rid of all the vowels. But you can certainly follow us on Instagram. I think Matt and Chad were right in saying that, I think it also gives a great window into how we try to communicate out about what we're doing, what our students are doing. And, the great lemonade that we're making, despite all the lemons we've been served this semester. Our students are doing some incredible work, and it's always an inspiration to be around them and to be around my colleagues. So definitely reach out to us if you have other questions or share them now. My God, we talked a lot, and I think that's okay. So you got a lot of questions in the chat. Oh, this is so great. So I'm so sorry I didn't get all these as we were going along.
Well, you were running the meeting. It's okay. Chad was doing a great job answering. I just started
Okay, good.
a little bit.
Oh, Chad, you're the best. Look at you. You are answering them. That's great. And anything that we didn't get to, we can absolutely get back to you on.
Yeah, so I want to reinforce the two last questions. First of all, drawing, just to clarify, again, I'm a terrible drawer, but I can draw typography. I can draw geometric things. I can draw things in perspective. If it's technical, I can do it. Anything else, if I draw a face, they all look like pig faces, regardless if it's a woman, regardless if it's a man, regardless if it's a pig. It doesn't even look like a pig when I try to draw a pig. But it's just like any other skill set. Some people bring great writing skills. Other people bring great photography skills. There's writing skills. There's printmaking skills. There's so many different things. And that's what the great part about communication design is. We embrace them all. And if you're strong at one thing, you bring it into the program and it influences your work. And we love that. We don't, if you are, I had a student many years ago who was interested in ceramics, and she started to think about how ceramics could shape some of her typographic forms. So we had another student who loved patterning. Patterns, everywhere was patterns. What is she doing now? She is creative director at Ottawa Design Leather, and she's doing patterning and fabrics for all the interiors of cars, and she's absolutely in heaven. So we often think that communication design is like a collect-all. It's easy for you to bring your skills into communication design, and we will foster anything that you want, because we'll give you a project set and say, here, you all have to solve it. Matt's going to do it in motion. I'll do it in print. Sue will light it up with some image making. Ashlyn will do something with some code, and Catherine would do something with experience. As long as it meets the objectives of the assignment, we don't care, because we all teach to the idea, solve the problem, use the skills and the talents that you have to solve that problem. And that's why all the results are so drastically different, even in the same classroom. And we love that.
Mm-hmm.
So it doesn't hurt to have good drawing skills, but it's not really needed. Our students do a lot of drawing, but it's drawing to do just to freeze an idea. It's thumbnail sketches. It's real quick, rough drawing. And then we, as Chad said, we turn to a whole variety of image making tools. And we use those tools to make things from being very rough to being very refined.
I agree with everything they said. I'm not a good drawer either, but I can draw the heck out of type, and I can draw. We all draw in our own weird kind of way, and weird like graphic way. So I'm also into patterning. I'm also into color. So like we figure out ways to communicate ideas without having to really draw them in a sort of fine art tradition. And, you know, what the plan will be in terms of fall 21. I think everyone still is, you know, sort of unclear, but I think our department has done a really great job working with the hybrid model that we've integrated this year, which for us is 1 day in person, 1 day remote. And that seems to be working really well for students. I think students get through that model, they get a sense of community, they get to see people. We, you know, have the whole floor is completely different than we've ever done it before. All students from the sophomore to senior level have an assigned desk, so they have a studio space. And then we have a couple of like rotating classrooms for freshman level courses. We'll probably have to reconfigure that a little bit for next semester, but that seems to be working really well. So people can get to see their classmates and hang out with them, obviously with masks, obviously with social distancing. But when we are together, that sense of community is still there. That sense of play is still there, but everyone's also really aware of what we're going through, like globally. And so we take it seriously. And, you know, if someone, you know, isn't following the protocols, we sort of really try and address that with them individually. But I think we're doing well. And I think the fact that our work is so digital, it lends itself to being able to kind of move on those remote days, to move it into those spaces.
Yeah, we were very strategic about staggering our classes. So when Chad's class is there, my class is not there, and then vice versa. So when my class is there, they have lots and lots of elbow room. There's very little other students in the space. So the class, as Sue said, we opened up our rooms even more than they already were open, so people can do the social distancing thing. And as Susan said, because we use so many digital tools, for us to pivot to online things was not a huge challenge. Of course, we had to rethink some of it, but a lot of it we were pretty comfortable with, and so were our students.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I also think, you know, we're still doing some fun and kind of, you know, not innovative, but we are trying to make it work. Sue and I are doing a team co-teach this semester. We have the entire floor to ourselves for Tuesday and Thursday afternoons. And we meet 1 day online with everyone, and then we meet 1 day in person, but we have the whole floor. So we have 27 students. They're spread out. Everyone is socially distanced. They're all in pods of 4 or 3 or 4 students, but those pods are spread out, and within their pods, they're spread out. But we have such a big floor, we're able to congregate all together, share messages. And the fun part is we have a huge auditorium on the 11th floor where all the participants were spread out 6 feet apart, so you could see the big presentations that the students gave on. And tomorrow we have a presentation with those same exact people, but we've got 6 10-minute presentations on Zoom that they will be presenting to the same clients. So we're making it work. We're being flexible, and it's fun. It's hard, but we're making it work, and the students are getting the same experience, I think, and just as well, because we're finding out that just being online, if we're just critiquing, sometimes it's easier just for us to be in person, to share a PDF, and for us to take a look at it, because we can get really close to it, zoom in and annotate, where in person, that's kind of hard. So we think we're being flexible.
Yeah, and I think, you know, there's a couple things, you know, again, the project that Chad's talking about is a team project. So again, this doubling down on collaborative is really important. It is a skill set that you will need as a professional 4 years from now. That will not change. So it's really important to have a class in a department where you have that opportunity to work on a team before you graduate, because you will be working on teams professionally no matter what you do. And then the other thing I would just say is that, again, I think that a lot of students, parents, people are like really bummed out about this whole Zoom world. But I will tell you that we have, like, our students, like, one thing you'll notice is that it's an industry that isn't really losing jobs, because people are adapting and being able to do the work that they do in a remote context and then still with a team. So any experience you have in Zoom is going to help you be better prepared for professional life. One of our adjunct faculty alumni working at Adobe 4 years ago, his wife got pregnant, decided that they were going to move from San Francisco back to Michigan. He asked the folks at Adobe, can I work remotely? They were like, totally. This was completely before COVID. He's been doing that ever since. People are doing that in business now because of COVID, but they were doing it before as well. So last summer, we had a bunch of students that got internships working remotely at really high-end design studios across the globe. So see this as an advantage, not as a disadvantage.
Yeah.
See this as a new skill that you need to cultivate, being able to talk into a window, sometimes with no one showing their face and sometimes with showing your face, so that you're able to kind of see that, again, it's the lemonade metaphor. See it as an opportunity to cultivate new skills that will differentiate you when you graduate and help you become employable in a variety of different contexts.
Yeah, and just as a reference, the career services, I forget what they're called now, career services department that helps you get jobs, came in and spoke to our class and said, what we're seeing now is a lot of people are starting to catch up and realize, okay, this COVID thing is going to be here for a while and maybe miss the boat. So they have a ton of employers that are actually asking for more portfolios. So there's not enough CD portfolios listed because they have so many employers coming in saying, we need interns. And they're already starting to prepare for next winter internships. And then, once January hits, then everyone's starting to look at summer internships and jobs. So I would completely agree with Sue. This is a prime market because we were, as communication designers, built for moments like this. Because I had classes last semester that had some print focuses. We completely shifted away from print and went to web and interactive because we were all on Zoom and we weren't printing anything out. And we really didn't miss a beat. So that flexibility is going to come in handy when you guys are starting to look for internships and jobs.
I'm just answering a question in the thread. Catherine asked about if there were tutors and help with coding.
Mm-hmm.
And what I was going to say is that, yes, coding is integrated into the course. So you're working on projects that integrate the coding into it. If you struggle, you can work with your instructor. Our faculty are very aware that coding can be kind of a challenge, but we also have tutors at the Student Success Center. The other thing, Catherine, I would say, and Matt will, I know, concur, we are not expecting you to be like a whiz bang coder when you graduate. We don't expect you to be a computer scientist when you graduate. In fact, our biggest whiz bang coders to this day are laughed at their jobs now because they're like sitting next to like the computer science majors, right? So Eric Krotsky, he jokes about that all the time, one of our alum. He was super smart coder. But what we want you to be able to do is understand how to work with coders and how to set up documents and how to design so that when you pass that stuff off to the coder, they're not laughing at you and they're not coming back to your, space going, Catherine, why did you set it up this way, right? So we just want you to kind of understand it so that you can design and understand what you need to do from your end to kind of help the coders make their jobs easier. Is that a good, accurate representation, Matt?
Yeah, we just scratched the surface, as Susan said.
Yeah.
Our goal is not to make developers. Our goal is to make smart designers, communication designers. But we know that code can be a really great tool in your toolbox. So if you learn just a little bit of code, it opens up so many more possibilities. And it shifts the way you think about making and about being a designer. Instead of being just, we all often say, instead of just being a tool user is somebody that uses Photoshop and Illustrator as a tool. If you learn just a little bit of code, you then become a tool maker. Then you can say, oh, I can hook it up to this little $30 circuit board and plug this wire into Play-Doh. And now I've made a physical interface. By just touching the Play-Doh, I can activate images on a screen or video or audio. Some students really gravitate towards that and they take it to the nth degree. Others just kind of take the beginning ideas, but all of it feeds into being a much better designer. But we never want anyone to think that you have to have code skills coming in or be intimidated by the idea like, oh, we're going to give all this code to students. It's not about that. It's just about teaching some basics, and that those basics can then feed just your other skills of being a designer.
Yeah, and just to further clarify that, what these guys are saying, you come in your freshman year and you're just doing type. It's just black and letters on a white space. And then we say, take type and put it on a screen. And then we're saying, well, take type and put it on a web. So it's this building experience. And some kids and students are like completely freaked out. But then by the time they're senior year, they're like, give me more, give me more. And then others are realizing 2 years out, 3 years out that, they really did like code in the organization of it. They were just, it was a little much. So I think it's a maturation process. And it's very important to know too, because we have motion and interaction skills in our department, our salaries coming out of school are much higher than not having those. So we're talking a difference of $10,000 to $15,000 just knowing, like these guys said, that you can talk to the computer developer and say, can you just take the line height down? I know you can do that. Or, here's a document and I'm going to show you the architecture and set that stuff up. So that's what the employers are working for. No one wants to hire somebody who just is really proficient printing. You want to have kind of a bigger picture on how all of these tools, as Matt's saying, fits into your toolbox. So.
Great questions. I love that you had like the whole queue going and that everyone was answering as we were talking. So that's great. Does anyone have any lingering questions or any other issues or things that you would like to address?
Anything you're dying to ask us?
There's maybe it's answered. Yeah, we do a little InDesign. We do not use Dreamweaver. We used to teach Dreamweaver back in the day. But we teach, believe it or not, we hand code our websites. But again, we teach a variety of tools and we embrace libraries, which means we hand code some things, but we also borrow heavily from code that already exists. So we're not reinventing the wheel. So an example of that would be, instead of learning JavaScript, we learn jQuery a little bit more than JavaScript. JavaScript more powerful, but it's a lot harder to learn. jQuery is a lot more kind of streamlined. So we'll introduce a few little bits of code here and there with that, and students will work with that. So no, we don't use Dreamweaver. We used to back in the day, but we hand code things a little bit more.
Yeah, and I think that the other qualification is like when you go to Motion, you're learning After Effects and you're learning some sound programs you probably never heard of before, but they're super easy to learn and you just download them. They're free off the internet. But the other thing is we're making our content too. So you're learning how to you're how to shoot video and you're using your own content and your own footage. So another thing is, we don't borrow a lot. So we do borrow code because, why make that up? But when it comes to content and footage and photos, we want you to photograph your own stuff. We want you to write your own things. We want you to videotape your own stuff. So we really think about designer as author pretty seriously. And we build those skills from freshman on up to when your thesis project comes around, you're writing and processing and doing all the things that you need to do, but it's your voice, it's your work, it's, your authority.
And, I would also just add to that as well, that, we integrate all technology into the curriculum. So if you're taking a class and you don't know how to use a certain software, all of that kind of demo is sort of built into the project. So projects are like, project 1, you might be learning this much of something. project 2, you're learning this much more of something. So we really, everything is sort of a building process. You start out, as Chad said, doing some very simple things early on, and you start moving up. And then similarly, software, we integrate into the classes. So you're not really bogged down by learning stuff. And before you know it, you're like learning software faster than you ever imagined. So I think we have a really smart curriculum, and I think we have really fabulous teachers. So we get everyone through the 4-year experience, and they're better for the experience, as are we.
Yeah,
Yes.
we've all been teaching for a long time. We've all been teaching together for a long time. So we work really hard at our curriculum, and we don't see the curriculum as sacred or unchanging. It's quite the opposite. We're always looking at how it should evolve and how Chad's classes should feed my classes, that should feed Sue's classes, and these things loop back around. So we work really hard at adapting our curriculum to the needs of culture, to the needs of user demands, and to technology, of course, too.
And industry.
And industry, yes.
Yeah, making certain that you can get a job with the skills you learn.
Yeah, my last shameless plug, because I know all of us probably have last plug, but because it's getting late, but we just want you guys to also realize that as Matt has said and Sue said, we are very proud of the curriculum. We're very proud of the fact that all 3, motion, interaction, and print, are integrated. It's unique across the country, and we've been to other programs, and we're very proud of what we do, but we also understand once you get here, you also understand how special a place this is. So we would highly, highly recommend, don't take our word. Come to campus, sit in a class, talk to the students, sit in the crit. You can and do that stuff. I know it's a little bit more limiting these days. And I know that they're limiting. I don't even know if they're limiting. I think they might be.
You can,
yeah.
They can come virtually. We
Yeah.
can, as I said earlier, please come to a class, but we would invite you virtually.
Yeah. So don't take our word for it. Come in, sit in, and realize what we have here and with our students especially is pretty special. So please come on in and experience it for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
All right. Well, wonderful. Well, I really appreciate you hanging out with us throughout the whole thing. So very fantastic to meet you all. And we look forward to seeing you again in maybe another Zoom space. And again, work with Lauren, reach out to me, but absolutely we can connect you to a classroom virtually, and you'll get a piece and taste of that experience.
I just put in our Instagram one more time. I know it was shared earlier at CCS_CD, as in communication design. Again, we're very active there. So we love that as a storytelling platform of what we do. So make sure you follow us and check us out. And I think you'll get a good little glimpse into our world.
Have a great night.
Yep, we all
Do
set.
something fun now and go outside and give your eyes a break.
Bye-bye.
All right.
See you.